Who is the GOAT in WWE? This question has been thrown out so many times in the WWE, and it's kind of like anything in life, really, if you think about it. Like, there is always that one person or that one actor, or that one celebrity that really just stands above everybody else. And, it's no different in the WWE. It's kind of just like in sports, like in basketball. Who's the GOAT in basketball? Is it Michael Jordan? Is it LeBron James? Or what about football? Is it Tom Brady? Or in boxing, Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson? And this question will literally just be going on until the end of time with a lot of sports in general. And the same as with WWE. Who is the GOAT in WWE? Now, I saw this post that Sports Illustrated posted about saying who their top 20 is in the WWE, and they consider the greatest of all time. And I do agree with their list for some of it, but not all of it. That some of this is my personal opinion. I do think that everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But again, we are going to talk about who some of the greatest were in WWE. So first, we have to talk about Bruno Sammartino. WWE would not be what it is without him. I'm just going to go on record and say that. Now, obviously, he's not in my favorites or anything, but he did start in the 70s, and he did start the entire thing with getting guys who came after him into the company. And sure, he did have a long title reign, and he did pretty much win most of his matches, but is that really what you would consider somebody to be a GOAT? So he did start it all, but we can't ignore the next person who came after him, and that was in the 80s. So obviously, we already know the whole story. The WWF needed somebody to kind of lead them into some kind of way with a character who could really get people watching.
Well, let me tell you something, brother!
Now, Hulk Hogan was definitely this larger-than-life type of character, and you could just kind of tell based off the way that this guy looked. He looked like he was going to be the guy for WWF. I mean, he was huge, he was jacked, and he just looked like somebody who you could really take seriously. And, of course, his whole entire mantra, eat your vitamins and say your prayers, role model for kids and for a lot of people. Hulk Hogan was everywhere in the 80s. And because of him, he was able to kind of start selling merch. He had 8 WrestleMania main events, which was pretty impressive. And Hulk Hogan just did a lot for the company in terms of just like his overall financial success. And he was able to bring the WWF into some type of relevancy. He's what led Vince McMahon into kind of needing to start something big. And this was what people consider the golden age era of WWE. And people really liked Hulk Hogan. Now, you can say what you want about Hulk Hogan now, but you can't deny the impact that he had in the WWF. Now, again, he's not in my top 10 or anything, but I will say I agree with him being one of the greatest of all time. He's, without a doubt, one of the biggest names in the company. So then, as Hulk Hogan was leaving, WWF needed to kind of find another face who was going to take Hulk Hogan's place, and so we started seeing other guys coming in.
Rest in peace.
Undertaker is in my top 5 personally, but Undertaker did have a big influence in this company because of just his historic WrestleMania streak. He had a really interesting character. He had so many different versions of himself, which was really unique to see. And Undertaker really was this guy that, you never thought you would see in wrestling because, he was a darker type of character and he just had like this aura around him, this presence. And he just really brought something unique to the table in terms of like what he could do. And not to mention, he just had so many iconic moments, like when he threw Mick Foley off the top of the cell, or just like knowing that he had a pretty interesting type of backstory with how he started in WWF and how he was basically with Paul Bearer and everything. And Paul Bearer, rest in peace to him, So Undertaker really is in that conversation to be the GOAT. And obviously, Undertaker had a lot of people gain a lot of respect for him over the years, too, because of just the fact that he did it for 30 years. This man literally did do WWF justice.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo!
Some people will even say that Ric Flair is, in their eyes, the greatest of all time because of the fact that he had some incredible matches, his character was really fun, and he also was a 16-time champion, which was unheard of, except, John Cena was the 17-time champion, so John Cena kind of took that throne of being more championships, but Ric Flair still was a pretty big character as well, and he is a more technical type of wrestler because of the fact that he was able to just tell some amazing stories while in the ring.
The best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
Who's your daddy, Montreal?
And we had guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, and their characters were more different than Hulk Hogan or Undertaker was. And Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, Bret Hart was the guy where he wanted to be the best there was and the best there will ever be. And Shawn Michaels was this young, brash, cocky type kid who just basically felt like he was better than everybody. And it actually really felt good to see a change of pace of like what exactly they were. We're able to just kind of tell some really cool stories, whether they were going against each other or other people. These guys really did make WWF feel a little different in terms of like their value and their quality of the product. And it just was so special to see something like this.
That's the bottom line. 'Cause Stone Cold said so.
Now enter Austin 316. Literally, this guy is without a doubt what everybody says is the best. The guy who is WWE when they were at the peak. This guy literally is what saved the company. Because you got to think, yes, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were doing a great job, and Undertaker was definitely a great draw in some way, but they needed somebody who could really carry the company. And the thing was during the Attitude Era when they were competing with WCW, rest in peace to Ted Turner, but when they were competing with the WCW, they were like really taking shots and jibes at WWF. And the thing was, they had Hulk Hogan on WCW. And that's when you got Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold is literally the embodiment of what the Attitude Era was. He literally is what everybody wanted to see. He's the person who in some way was the most relatable because of the fact that he could really rebel against the boss and flip the boss off and beat your boss up at work. And it just was one of the coolest things to ever see. And we also had the fact that, he was able to bring in a lot more sales, eyes glued on the product for when Stone Cold was around. And anytime Stone Cold showed up, his music would hit, you would always be so excited to see him come out. And he just really felt like he was this really big deal in the company. And, WWF had something, and Vince McMahon had something so special on his hands because he knew Stone Cold was the guy that could really carry the company into a different type of level. Now, obviously, he had the most merch sales. His Austin 316 shirts did numbers, and still to this day, they're still selling like crazy. And Stone Cold really just was the guy to really bring it up to 11. And he was the guy that really, I feel like everybody can sit here and say, like, he's definitely in that level with Hulk Hogan. Now, of course, like I said before, I would personally say Stone Cold is better than Hulk Hogan. And that's only me just saying this out of bias because, Stone Cold literally was a character who, he took nothing from nobody. He was that guy. He even came up with the what chants, and the what chants are still being said to this day by the crowd. So that's even amazing as well.
If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
The Rock did start in WWE with Stone Cold around the same time. And of course, they were able to kind of tell some okay stories because this was when The Rock was still in the nomination of domination. And Rock was doing okay in terms of just who he was. He was just part of a group, though. But it was until Stone Cold was injured and The Rock actually had a chance to kind of say, like, who he really was. And he became the people's champion. He became the Rock that we all knew. And this was actually really big at the time. Now, obviously, he was doing pretty well in terms of the 99, but 2000 was definitely his year because he made WWE special. He would always show up. He had the most electrifying catchphrases. He was always mocking his people and his opponents, and he just brought a different type of vibe. So to think that they were able to make two guys, both Stone Cold and The Rock in the 90s and early 2000s, in the span of 3 years was pretty insane to even just say. And not to mention, they just had this aura around them for the Attitude Era. Now, obviously, for me, I'm always going back and forth on who really is better between these two. Now, of course, Stone Cold and The Rock, they also had an amazing rivalry as well, and this is actually what made them so big. We had 3 WrestleManias with them, but the thing with these two was just the simple fact that they just had just so much like personality. And like Stone Cold, yeah, Stone Cold was definitely the living embodiment of the Attitude Era, but The Rock definitely had the charisma factor. As we guys already know, 2002, 2003 came and rolled around, and we started to kind of see kind of a dip in quality in WWE in terms of like what we were seeing in the Attitude Era. And The Rock was definitely still around. Stone Cold was around, but he wasn't nearly as around. And we kind of needed somebody else to fill those shoes. We did have guys like Triple H and Kurt Angle and Edge still there, but they weren't on that level of those two. They weren't guys that people would really like want to tune in every night to see. And, obviously it took a little bit of time, but we did get Brock Lesnar, we did get Batista, Randy Orton, and they were doing great in terms of what they were doing.
My client, Brock Lesnar!
Brock Lesnar was actually supposed to be the next face of the company. That's literally how much confidence Vince had in Brock because of just the fact that, Brock was definitely the guy who was able to beat The Rock. He beat Hulk Hogan. He beat Undertaker. All guys that I just mentioned. And he was able to become a pretty big deal. But of course, due to burnout, Brock left the company in 2004. And so WWE was kind of scrambling on like who was to make the next guy become the face. Well, then you enter John Cena.
Because the champ is here!
Now, obviously, I have a lot of bias on this one. John Cena is, in my opinion, he is the greatest of all time. He went from being this guy who was almost going to get fired in 2002. And yeah, sure, he was there in 03 and 04 while Brock was still there. But John Cena wasn't doing as much of what we would see him do after Brock left. But he was also slowly building up his name as well. And that's the cool thing with him was it was an organic rise of how he became so big in the company. Because people started seeing how he was the doctor of thugonomics. People would cheer him all the time. They would always want to see him, win. And there was even points where, they would tease us with, is he going to become the next champion? And he did hold the U.S. title for a long time as well. But after that, it was kind of like we would always get teased, when is he going to become the champion? And John Cena just had such an incredible time being the guy, and people always would tune in to see like what he had to do. And of course, he did finally win his first championship at WrestleMania 21. And for the next 15, 20 years, he was the guy until, of course, people started to turn on him. Even though people didn't really like him, they still tuned in because he still was a draw and he still was making the company money. We needed somebody to fill those shoes in the company, and so they did have John Cena be their guy. And this is kind of what the mistake was that they made, because while they made it with The Rock and Stone Cold, while they were able to make two megastars at the same time, essentially, with John Cena, they put all their eggs in one basket. Because actually in '05, Batista was going to be their guy too with John Cena, because if you can tell, they were placing these two on the covers of the games and magazines. They were even the last two in the Royal Rumble, so it kind of would have made sense for them to have two big stars at the same time, just like what they did with Stone Cold and The Rock. But then you get to seeing how they started treating how Cena was, because Cena was clearly a bigger draw and had a little bit more personality. He became their guy. John Cena even held 17 world titles, and he did something even outside of the company, and that was he made the most Make-A-Wishes ever. But whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny the impact that he had. So then after Cena, well, who was next? Because literally after this is kind of when you don't see any stars.
Acknowledge me.
A guy named Roman Reigns. Now, Roman Reigns started in 2012, and he became a part of the WWE with the Shield. And right away, you could just kind of tell that WWE was definitely positioning him to be their guy. While Dean and Seth were still really fun to watch, Roman was this really quiet, like kind of quiet, but powerhouse type of character. And he seemed like he was going to be somebody big. He just had this aura around him. And it probably could just be due to the fact that he had his Samoan heritage with The Rock. Well, here's the thing. We see him in the Shield, they were doing their thing, they break up, and he became his own type of character. And the thing with this was they were trying to really give us this idea that Roman was going to become the guy. He was going to become the person to carry the company. And they didn't really know what to do with Roman, because it's almost like they didn't really know how to do his character right, because he would come out and he'd say some corny stuff. People booed him constantly, and Roman just was not vibing well with many of the fans. And people would always say, like, Vince was doing the same thing with Roman as they were doing with Cena. They were putting all their eggs in one basket instead of trying to focus on other people or give people what they wanted to see. And that was guys like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk. So it just was a little bit different. So then we had to get to 2020 when he came back as the Tribal Chief. And I will say this about Roman, definitely did need this rebuild of a character, because literally when he came back as the Tribal Chief, he literally made this company so much better. And because of him, he really was carrying the shows in 2020. And we can't forget about Roman's entire bloodline story, because this is really what helped elevate the company. It also gave the Usos a little bit more importance in the company, and it really helped like elevate them as well. And this is when like the story actually mattered, and it was a 4-year story, which was pretty incredible that they were able to do all that. And personally, I feel like when they do end the Bloodline saga, I feel like they should just kind of end it with The Rock versus Roman. That's just me personally. And he was a draw for people. And with him having his title reign, people would tune in because they wanted to see him either retain or lose the title. So main event at 11 WrestleManias. And this is something that's just amazing to say, because Hulk Hogan does have 8 WrestleManias, but Roman Reigns is the only person to have main evented this many WrestleManias, which is really unheard of. This was the Roman we should have seen in 2015 when Vince was trying to give us this idea. So yes, Roman was becoming a bigger deal now. And that's why they were kind of scared to take that risk of turning him heel, because they didn't want the fans to turn on him. But personally, I think this was needed for the best. And of course, we see him now, and he still has this great aura around him. Now we don't really know who the GOAT is right now in terms of WWE, because Roman is still there, and they do have Cody Rhodes because he is the top company face right now, but he's just not really on Roman's level. And Roman's not even on Cena's level. You got to think about that. Cody now. And Cody is doing a fine job. But also the thing with Cody is he's kind of too repetitive. He doesn't really feel like he's taken as seriously. And people will say that, in some way, Cody is kind of like the modern day Cena. But the thing with Cena was he actually had character. He was actually had a character, and he was a draw, because whether you loved him or hate him, you always tuned in for Cena. But I just wanted to kind of leave that question of, like, who do you guys consider the GOAT in WWE? Again, this was all personal opinion. I consider Cena to be the GOAT. Now, some people will say that Stone Cold's the GOAT, or some people will say that Hulk Hogan's the GOAT, but for me, it's John Cena. And I always feel like with him, like, he just was a different type of guy where, he was able to carry the company for as long as he did. Yeah, just comment down below, who do you guys think the GOAT is in WWE? And, like, who would you consider to be your GOAT in a way? Make sure you comment down below. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. So make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll just catch you guys in the next one. Peace.